Hi, everybody. So it's Thursday. It's the 20th of October, and I'm here with my mother, who is also a phenomenal talent in her own right. She's a creator of many a scary story for us growing up and for her grandchildren. And I thought it might be really fun to talk to her about a little bit about herself and also about some of her creative projects. So, first of all, Mum, good to see you. Good to see you. And I guess let's tell everybody about your name because it's up here as Vincent Martinez, and obviously everybody knows you as Dorothy. I know you as Mum. So, do you want to give us a little background to that?
Well, Vincente is my middle name, so I refer to that occasionally. And I use my Spanish grandparents' surname, Martinez.
Yeah, so it feels really natural for
So,
you.
yes, that's all. Yes, yes.
It's a very pretty name, and actually when you put the V on a book, when you put the V next to the M, it's very striking. So I think it's a really good creative name for you. So so obviously you're my mum, but you want to tell people a little bit about where you're living and what you're up to?
Where I'm living, where I'm living now?
Yeah,
Yes.
like in
Okay.
France.
Well, I'm in France, southwest France. We bought the house over 20 years ago. The first few years renovation. And then 13 years ago, we decided when my husband had to take your father to early retirement, sorry. Uh, he was required as
Was
well.
he also
But
required?
yeah, he was also required. Yeah, so we ended up moving here. But the idea for the custodians came while it was just a holiday home.
Yeah, now tell
Okay.
people, so you're on a remote piece of land down a little quiet country lane, and you'd come from London, hadn't you? So it lent itself to kind of creepy atmospheres.
We're surrounded by a lot of trees, which initially, when I first thought about the custodians, it was something that they inhabited the trees, that's where they lived. And as we had so many around us, it was feasible.
Yeah, so they would go up in the trees, and so you were just like going about your business, and you just thought, oh, this would make a cool story.
No, no, what happened was for the first few years, we came out to renovate and we brought people with us. And one year, my sister came out with her three children who were young at the time. And we were all sitting in the garden on an August night. The sun was going down, and we had these little eyes looking at me saying, "Oh, tell us a story." So it was just imagination at that moment. And that's when the custodian started to develop. But it wasn't until I went home and decided that I would like to keep it going. Obviously, a lot of it changed. It wasn't always initially as I described it in the beginning. But yes, and the story started. And over the next 10, 15 years, I would say, it just slowly emerged and the characters came to life. And particularly where I live, it lent itself to the atmosphere. We have a big chateau here. We have tunnels that go under the ground from the chateau out. It was just perfect
Hmm.
for lions.
Yeah, and but how come you came up with the name Custodians? How did that come about?
Um, because when you read the book, you realize that you almost feel a sense of sympathy for what became the monsters later on because it wasn't their fault. And you were quite pleased almost that they had people to guard them, to look after them. And that's where the name Custodians came in.
Hmm. Now, you're a big fan of Stephen King, in horror in general, I would say, but Stephen King's books in particular. Which is there a Stephen King book that this kind of maybe reminds you of a little bit?
Um, well, there's many, many, many. I could sort of cut my teeth on Salem's Lot. That was the first scariest book I think I've ever read. And I read it somewhere we were on holiday I had 3 children at the time, and they were all asleep in the caravan. It was a stormy night. Even my husband was asleep. It was beating down on the caravan, the lightning and the thunder. And I chose that moment to read Salem's Lot. And for me, it was probably one of the greatest books that I think I've read, for horror anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's a small town with a big secret, and I feel like that is
Yeah,
what Rusagnac is. It's a small town. It's very picturesque. It's very sleepy. You go
yeah,
there, you're just chilling out. You're on holiday, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself in the middle of some absolute horror show. And it's really
yeah.
it's cleverly drawn out. I think because you've had quite a bit of time living where you live now, you've got to know local people, you've got to know the kind of character of local people, and you really tapped into that like small town vibe. And then the strangers coming in and being the kind of like the dimwits that get caught in the middle of the trap kind of thing. So I think it's a really powerful book series. It's more than one book, obviously. It's a 4 book series, and it does meander, doesn't it? It does meander through different time periods. Do you want to talk a little bit about your interest in the Second World War?
Well, I didn't realise just how much when I was writing the book or putting it down on paper, how much the Germans featured here. And it was only talking to the neighbour next door. I mean, she's dead now, but she remembers the occupation. So when I was putting this down on paper, I didn't realise that the Germans were actually here, and then that which led me on to what how the German doctors experimented, and it sort of it fitted in with the storyline. So I was not pleased, because it must have been awful for the people here, but it was actually historical. But then that's where you came in, because I didn't realize a lot of this till you pointed it out. And
Yeah.
also the maquis, that was interesting.
Yeah, the Maquis are the local French resistance during the Second World War, and how this kind of played out as mum, like I said, she told the story first to the kids, and she would tell other kids the story, and she'd tell us the story, and it kind of built. And then one day, my mother just sat down and wrote a really good, strong draft. And then what she began to do is research, like she said, the Nazi occupation, and it began to inform the plot with credible history. And then that's, I guess, my interest at that point was peaked, wasn't it, Mummy? It was like you and I would have these conversations. I would read the draft that you had, and I'm like, let's dig into some research here. And that's why I feel this book series, it's taken a long time to pull together. And I think that when people read this book, they're going to feel the richness. I know that the editor that worked on the book said the same thing. He said there's so many layers to this story, and it really draws you in. And I think that is down to the fact that, in the very beginning, you did pull in all of these elements when you created the concept itself. And I think it's really important. That's why this interview is very important. I think people need to know about you and know about your terrific imagination, because obviously this is not the only story you've told other people for entertainment. And I know that you're working on a couple of ideas also for yourself, right? Right now, solo.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, academically, that wasn't my thing, but I had a great imagination. And imagination is something that you don't need anybody else, and you can take it anywhere. So this really helped when getting this down on paper, this story.
Well, I think you're amazing. Um, you always have a great idea, whether it's a story or whether it's just a color for a wall or whether it's somewhere to go for the day. You always have a million ideas, and so I wanted everybody to get to meet you and know of you. And I know that you're the person who runs the Custodians Twitter. So if you'd like to get in touch with my mother and ask questions about the books and just general questions about horror and stuff, my mum's available on the Custodians on Twitter. So, all right, Mum. Well, I know I'm going to see you again pretty soon, one way or another. And I just want to say, is there anything you'd like to say before we go and before I stop recording, and maybe about the book that you'd like people to know? Is there any interesting character, a character that stands out for you, for example?
I think it covers a lot of emotion. For me, it covered a lot of emotion. There's sympathy in there. There's fear. There's love. It's all kinds of emotions are thrown into this storyline. And what's good is it could go on and on and on. It's got a future. It's got a future.
That's right. And just in case anyone out there from the Walking Dead franchise is stuck for ideas, my mother's volunteering to join your creative team. I'm just letting you know she's one of your top fans and she has brilliant ideas. So give her a message on Twitter. Watch that space. All right. Thanks a lot, Mum.
Thank you,
Stay
darling.
on the line because I'm going to stop recording and then we can just talk.